Hello everyone. This is a video overview explaining what to do to get feedback from an AI tutor on your rough draft. So I'm currently on the lessons page for online classes for this unit. This is drafting the Garber essay. And the reason that I'm here is that there are a lot of things here that could be useful to you in your interaction with AI. So I do give lots of examples in the course of sample introductions, sample body sections, sample conclusions, and things like that. And I often give examples that are on different topics initially so that it doesn't color your thinking. But the examples that I give are the exact same thing that you need to do, but just with your topic. And so that's the case right here with this one. I've got a sample intro based on a different article that has to be framed around that author's article, and the thesis has to be framed around what that author says. So that could be useful for me to put in as an example when I'm asking for feedback on body paragraphs, for example. And if you look here at the bottom, I've got some more examples, intro, conclusion on different topics, but at the very, very bottom, I have a sample intro and conclusion for the Garber essay. So I could even, click on that, download the original file. I could save that to my download folder, and then I've got that if I need it or decide to use it. And maybe I take maybe I take one of these on a different topic, and maybe I download that just in case I decide to use it. Because if I have an example of something that is similar that to what I need to do, then that makes it easier for the AI to have a comparison point of something that we know to be accurate and on point, but it's just on a different topic. You can also go over here and, anytime there's anything in a lesson that's useful, you can summarize or paraphrase those things to explain to AI what you have to do. And so things like this, like when you get to the part where you're getting help with the feedback, you see here that I have this lame cartoon here that pokes fun of the fact that it's really common for students to put, in conclusion, I restate my main points in a super wordy fashion to squeeze out another paragraph of this paper. And so, you could put in the context of your chat, when you're working on your conclusion, to help make sure that you're not doing that, and to help you figure out how to make a natural transition, or whatever the case may be. So let me click over here into a sample thread that I haven't started yet, but I wanted to remind you that anytime you're getting feedback on something, the first thing you need to do is the AI needs to know what the assignment is. Now in this case, since it's the essay, we definitely want to either upload the assignment sheet, or you want to be very accurate in your description of what that is. You can't just say, oh, I've got to write a paper on this article, because if it doesn't know exactly the kind of paper that you have to write about, it might assume that you're writing a rhetorical analysis, and we're not. And so then all of the advice that it gives would be off track. So if it doesn't know, it's going to take a guess, and it's going to, give you answers, but you always want to provide that. And anytime you're doing an assignment, like let's say an outline for this paper, you would also want to supply this, because this gives the requirements for the paper, and the AI or a human tutor would need to know what the requirements for the paper are before they could give you any actionable and good advice on that outline. They've got to know what the ultimate goal is, and then they also need to know what are the specific requirements of the assignment that you want help with. So if it's an outline, you'd have to know, like, well, what all has to be there besides, the things that are talked about in the assignment sheet. So since we're talking about the draft here, we've got the assignment sheet, we've got the article, and I have a sample student essay here from a couple of years ago, and it's been de-identified. I have removed the name and I am pretending to be that student. So when you very first go in and you're going to start an interaction, you need to establish who you are, and you need to assign a role to Claude or Gemini, whichever chatbot you're using. Remember that for the activities that you're doing in class, the primary choices should be Claude or Gemini, not because I don't like ChatGPT, I do. I have a paid subscription to ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and others. So I like them all, but I want to expose you to some that maybe you haven't been around. And I will say that Claude is very good at, or can be very good at things like this, and also in making it feel more like a conversation. Gemini is very good, and I use it quite a bit. It's probably the AI system that I use the most right now, and it varies, depending on what I'm doing. But for these kinds of things, I really like Claude, and I highly encourage you to use it for things like this, and to also compare it to Gemini and ChatGPT. Keep in mind that when you're working on the free tiers with Claude, the more things you upload, the more it will cut into your questions on the free tier. So if you run out of questions, remember that you're never thwarted. You can always take your materials over to Gemini, or even over to ChatGPT, and you could pick up where you left off, upload the documents that you need, provide the context, and you can even take the conversation that you got out of Claude and you can provide that as context, and you can say, oh, well, I was working with Claude and we worked on this portion of feedback up to this point, and you can provide that in there, and then ChatGPT or Gemini could pick up where it left off. Or you could also ask for a second opinion, where you can kind of see how they might differ or align. But basically you can just pick up where you left off while you're waiting for your questions to reset. This is why when you're getting feedback on anything, you really shouldn't wait until the day of, because you want to give yourself time, especially on Claude, to run out of questions, wait for it to reset so you could return back, and so on. And just remember that even if you did wait till the day of and you're like, oh man, I ran out of questions, I guess I'm just going to have to call it a day and turn this in and write a reflection on what I got. No, you can pivot and go to another chatbot and pick up with, maybe you already got feedback on the introduction and the first body section, and now maybe you go to another chatbot and now you pick up and you get feedback on, not body paragraph, but body section. Number 2, number 3, the conclusion, use of sources, and so on. You can also, when you need it, you can, again, upload examples that you've been given in the course, and extra context. If it's something that I've already graded or you've gotten some feedback on it from me, you can also copy paste what I said in there or summarize it. My professor said this, my professor said that, and it provides it with more context. So let's take a look at what I put here. You don't have to put the exact same thing, but what we want to avoid is we don't want to say, I want you to be a tutor, give me feedback. Never ever ask just for feedback. That is a lot like going into a restaurant and just saying, I'll have some food. You have to be very, very specific in terms of what you want, and you want feedback on very specific elements of the essay, and you always want to start with the most highest order of concerns, and that is making sure that your thesis and your topic sentences are in alignment with what you've been asked to do, not only in the assignment sheet, but also in all the lessons that have been presented. We already know that we've identified the 3 main areas that students can choose from for, what they want to focus on in their paper. We know that Garber argues or has concerns about the impact of entertainment and digital media on 3 core areas of society: critical thinking and our ability to discern the truth. That's one. The next one is empathy. And the last one is civic engagement, or political engagement, whatever you want to call it, democracy. So those three things are what we have to choose from. All the other items that you could talk about technically fall under one of those three. So anybody who is struggling with, I don't know what to write, you just need to know what Garber's thesis is, and that's it. She's worried that if we're not careful, that we're so consumed with entertainment and digital media that if we're not careful, we're going to end up a lot like the characters in dystopian novels, and we might lose our ability to think critically or know what's really true. We might lose our ability to be empathetic and kind to one another, and we might diminish our capacity for being effective, engaged citizens. And if we're a politician, we might lose sight of what it means or what it should be to be an effective politician. So those are the three things. So, if you want to keep it simple and keep it focused on the main claims, which is what we want to do, there you go. So everybody's working with the same ingredients, if you will. We've got the same article, we've got the same prompt, and we're all working with Megan Garber's thesis, which is the same for everybody. But what we do with that's going to be very different. Just like if we were on one of those cooking shows like Chopped, and if I gave everybody a basket of the same kinds of ingredients and say, okay, I want you to come up with, a dish that, meets these criteria, we've all got the same ingredients, but we're all going to cook something a little bit different in terms, we're going to have a different focus, a different things that we're bringing to the table. And so I've got here that I'm a student in a rhetoric class, what the nature of the paper is, but I've got the assignment sheet here. I'm pointing out to it that I've got the article, the assignment sheet, and my essay. I'm also telling it that I have access to examples from the course, so maybe if I forget at some point to provide some of those, perhaps it will prompt me. But most importantly, I need to tell it what to do and what not to do. And so here's where I say, don't do anything for me. Don't write suggestions or revisions or feed me anything. Your job is to help me see what's missing, what's off track, or what I need to do specifically to improve my paper for draft 2. And I'm also pointing out to the end here that I want the conversation to be productive and thorough, but not so long that it's overwhelming that I can't focus on what I need to do. I also have a document in the lessons, and there will also be a copy right above the exercise or the assignment link, where you will ultimately and much later include your AI thread and a reflection not only on the feedback that you got from the AI tutor, but also the feedback that you will get from the human tutors from the CLE or Upswing, and also from the peer reviews. So we're going to have one assignment in this upcoming week where you will turn in a reflection based on all three sources of feedback. Two sources of feedback are human, your peer reviews and the tutor reviews, and then we've got one source of feedback from the AI, and the quality of that feedback will be highly dependent on how you approach this and whether or not you do this in the right spirit. So we'll have plenty of feedback plus our own self-assessment to drive revisions for draft 2. And draft 2 is not graded on quality, just so everybody knows. It's graded on effort and evidence of revision and the work that you put in between drafts. So I do want to alleviate everybody's concerns, if anybody has any, and if anybody has fallen behind. I want to clarify a few things on that front. Draft 1 is always graded on completion, following directions, and just making a good faith effort that is not AI generated. And if you do those things, you'll get 100, even if it's completely off track. Maybe you didn't focus on the right things. Maybe you didn't focus on her main claims. or whatnot. But as long as I see a good faith effort, it's complete, there's no AI, and I see some semblance that you have either paid attention in class, or if you're in an online class, that you've paid attention to the examples, the lessons, the videos. It is a good practice whether you're in a face-to-face class or in an online class to take notes on the things that you encounter, not because they're rocket science or anything, but so that you remember and so you can process. Because if you don't, you may kind of understand in the moment, but then later when you sit down to work on something, it might be a blur and you feel frustrated and maybe a little bit lost. All right, so I want to share with you this handout here, and I want to make clear that this is just a sample of some things you could ask. What I don't want everybody to do, I don't want you to use this like a script. I don't want you to go in and just copy paste this one and copy paste the next one. I want you to learn how to have a conversation with AI on your own. There are already some people in class that are already pretty skilled with using AI. And maybe that's a bit of a misnomer. It's really kind of like talking to a person in a way, but you do have to have a sense of what you've been asked to do and what the required parts are, what goes in an introduction, what goes in a conclusion, the correlation between what you say you're going to do in the thesis and what you actually do in the body paragraphs. The more you know and the more self-aware you are about what the assignment calls for, and also just your own looking in your essay. I mean, at some point you ought to be able to look and see, oh my gosh, I said I was going to talk about these two things in my thesis, but what I'm actually doing in the body paragraphs is not that. So, you don't always need AI to point these things out to you, and it's not a good sign if you have no clue whatsoever if you're on track. So it's really important that we get a handle on how a paper works, and it's pretty basic in terms of the thesis and the correlation to the body sections, especially in this paper. If you're listing the parts in the thesis, it makes it easier to see. So again, what I don't want you to do is don't take this PDF and don't upload this PDF into Claude and say, oh, answer all these questions, because you'll get feedback all in one lump, and a lot of these questions are hypothetical and have nothing to do with your particular paper. I just asked some general questions that could apply to anybody, and then there are some questions that I asked kind of with the mindset of pretending that I'm a student that has a certain issue in a paper. So here's an example. I might ask AI to evaluate the execution of my second body section, which spans from paragraphs 2 to 4. I feel like I may be summarizing too much here and the argument may be lacking. What am I leaving out or not considering? Make suggestions of what I might be able to add or argue from a conceptual standpoint, but don't do it for me. Right? So this would be me having some self-awareness about a section in the paper that I'm kind of iffy on. I can already kind of sense that maybe it's too heavy on summarizing. So probably a question like this is already self-aware. I can see there's a lot of stuff here from the article and maybe not so much from me, but I'm stuck. I don't really know what I could add. And, I need the AI to ask me some questions where the light bulb will go off and I get an idea of what I can do there. So don't take this as a template for yours. There are a lot of questions here that could apply to anybody's paper, but then I have some, that are meant to emulate what you need to do when you're demonstrating close awareness of what you did in your paper or what you're trying to do and what concerns you have for that. One of the biggest suggestions I can have, though, is that when you get to the end of your thread, you might want to ask it to identify 3 areas to focus on. But when you're going through and asking these questions, you should start with the thesis first, because if the thesis is not at place and it's not on point, and if you're not focusing on her main arguments about the impact of entertainment on critical thinking, empathy, and civic engagement, if it's not having something to do with one of those 3, there's potential for it that it's off track, right? Because that's her main argument. Those are the three main claims that she makes, and everything in her article really falls under the umbrella of those three. So you start with the thesis, and then you need to see if what you say in your thesis is matching what you have in your topic sentences. If you can see that, if you know that, you don't have to ask about it. So don't ask questions that you don't need to ask, but kind of you've got to think about it as you're participating in these. So these are more for inspiration, so you can see. Totally fine for you to have them printed out so you can look at them, so you can have a guide for that. But again, we don't want to use it as a script, and I want you to have, the experience of at some point this turning into a conversation where you're really reading what Claude says and you're responding, you're reacting, and you're not just glossing over those kinds of things. So, and then when you're done with the feedback, remember that you will come up to the top, and I haven't asked a question yet, so you won't see it, but over here there's a share button, and that's what you would share for the link for Claude, and you would do a write-up. But the difference on this one is that you're going to be doing a write-up on the feedback you get from Claude. You're going to do add a paragraph or two on the feedback you got from your two peer reviewers, and you'll also do that for the tutor review. So I want to say a few other things that are not exactly related to this, but to encourage those who are behind to get back on track. So one thing I want to emphasize is that, we're currently in week 5, and we've had a pretty slow pace so far. And I'm doing what I can to slow us down a bit, because I really don't want to leave anybody behind. And I'm doing everything I can to revise and add things and reach out to people so that we can get everybody on board. So I would like to ask that those students who have turned in a completed draft, maybe reach out to classmates. And if you find anybody out there who has, feeling a little bit lost or whatnot, encourage them, and let's create a class, a sense of community here, where it's not just me, but it's all of us working together to help each other. So I want to say a couple of things, because week 5 was about drafting, and I have collected those drafts, and I'll be putting you guys in groups soon. And I've already started, doing that to some extent, but those who don't have a draft need to try to get it done in the next day or two. I'll try to delay releasing the peer review groups to give those who didn't turn in a draft an opportunity to turn it in, not so much for credit, but so that you can participate in week 6. Every single assignment and everything we do in week 6 all the way up to the final draft is completely dependent on draft 1. So if you don't have a draft 1 done, you can't participate in any of the assignments, not one, in week 6. You won't be able to participate in the peer reviews. You won't be able to participate in the evidence of feedback assignment, because you don't have a draft to get feedback on, and you won't be able to participate in or turn in draft 2, because draft 2 is graded only on revision. It's graded only on revision. So it's graded on effort. It's graded on evidence of all the work that you put in between drafts. And I'll be talking about that in week 6, the process that you have to do for that. So draft 2 is not graded on quality. Draft 1 is not graded on quality. They are graded on very specific things. Draft 1 is always graded on completion, following directions, and making a good faith effort that shows that you have read and processed not only the article and the assignment sheet, but also the lessons. You should be printing out anything that's in the course that could be printed out, so that you have those things in front of you. If you don't, if you just look at them and close that and go on, then you don't have the very materials that I've put in the course that you have as a model or guide to see, okay, this is the pattern that I need to be following, even if it's on a different on a different topic. So I also don't want anybody to be discouraged that didn't turn in a draft. And if you don't get to participate in the peer reviews, then you can take this next week, week 6, to get caught up as quickly as you can, but being on target so that we can get you in position to turn in something, because I need to see a progression. So I can't have the final draft be the first time that I see anything from a given student. I need to see ideally draft 1, draft 2, and draft 3 from everybody. At minimum, I would at least need to see a draft prior to draft 3 so that I can see the evolution of that. So everybody's still in the running, everybody's still okay, and I want to do one last thing at the expense of maybe making this video just a little bit longer than it needs to be. But I think it's important because we probably have about half of the class that did not turn in a draft, and this is very concerning, especially given that draft 1 and draft 2, they're not weighted very heavily. They're not major grades, and they're graded basically on effort and following directions and, making a good faith effort. So I like to think of this class kind of like t-ball. You got to stand up at the, you got to go up to the plate, you got to have a bat in your hand, and you got to take a swing at the ball. And for drafts 1 and 2, I try to put the ball on the tee so that, all you got to do is hit it. All you got to do is try, and then run to first base, run to second base. And, before we, start trying to come around to the home base for the home run and the final draft. We just need something to work with, and it needs to be complete. It needs to, we need to try. And I want everybody to know, that you shouldn't, I think sometimes people are paralyzed by the idea of perfection. And I want to, kind of correct that misimpression. Rough drafts are supposed to be rough. It just gives us something to work with. And draft 2 is not going to be perfect either. But let me click in to the syllabus just to show, a lot of times if you know the math of how your grade is calculated, it can create, alleviate a lot of concerns, because sometimes I have people that will, sort of completely shut down because they are frustrated and they think, oh, they're doing terribly, and they're not. Since we have 3 papers in the course, a rough draft is worth 1% of your overall grade, so 1 point on your average. And if you do it, you turn it in, it's complete, it's on task, and it doesn't have AI in it, you get all of those points. You get a point for the Garber essay, a point for the next paper we do, and a point for the other one. Revised drafts are where the really heavy lifting comes in. This is where we've got a draft to work with, and the name of the game is just improvement. It's elbow grease, rolling up your sleeves, and making improvement to the content, execution, and argument for the paper. And then it's the final drafts that are worth more. So our Garber essay, the final draft's worth 12%, for our research paper 17, and so on. So if you think about it, and if you look at the assignments that we have done, we haven't done a whole heck of a lot in terms of, it being a lot of your grade at this point. I would say that everybody at this point is still in the running for an A or a B, but not if we continue and don't, get something done for the draft. It's just paper and ink, nothing to be afraid of, and nobody's out to bleed red ink over everything on these first drafts. We just got to have, it's like art class in a way. You got to have a lump of something to work with, but if you never get that clay out and put it on your table and take a stab at doing that, you'll never, you won't be in position to be able to turn in the papers. And that's kind of one of the only deal breakers in this class. If you don't turn in major assignments, you can't progress in the course. You can't get credit. We have 3 major assessments plus the final, so that's 4. So we got to do these drafts in order to be in position. So, and I also want to do one last thing. I know I've said that probably twice already, but I want to show you something that I have added that you might find useful. And a few people in this and a couple of other classes have already seen these, but let me scroll down here. I have a folder now. I've made some materials based on my course videos and some handouts that you can look at if you want to. So, for example, I have a PowerPoint here about getting AI feedback on a draft. I've got an infographic here about the upshot of that. And so I made these with Notebook LM. I uploaded this, my questions or whatever, and got Notebook LM, which is also one of my favorite tools, and we'll talk more about it later. And made, where did it go? There we go. This infographic talking about the upshot of what you do anytime you're getting feedback on a draft. Okay, I have rambled for long enough. Let me wrap this up and get it out. I hope y'all have a great day. Please do what you can to encourage classmates to make an effort to get a draft done. We're all in the same boat together, and I want to get us all to the shore safely. Y'all have a great day, a great afternoon, and reach out if you need anything.